Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from today. I'd love to know. And if you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to like and subscribe. All right, let's jump in. The stars drifted in silence, scattered like sparks across the endless black. Floating among them, a sleek alien scout ship crept forward, its silver hull cold and quiet, its scanners sweeping across the void. Inside, the crew of the Drevik vessel whispered in hushed tones, unaware that they were about to make the worst mistake of their lives. They had been watching Earth's borders for years, curious about the strange little species that had clawed their way into space. Humans, wild, reckless, loud, always fighting among themselves. The Drevik thought they were clever, covert, silent, invisible. Their ship was cloaked with tech so advanced, no one had ever detected it until today. Their scanners caught something strange in the dark. A lone ship, massive, motionless, just floating at the edge of the Terran zone like it was waiting for something. Curious, the Drevik commander gave the order to scan it. They wanted to see what these humans had built. But the moment the scan beam touched the ship's hull, everything changed. Lights flickered across its surface, lines of glowing red, pulsing like veins through armor too thick to be real. The ship didn't move. It didn't speak. It didn't even power up its engines. Then in one sudden flash, the Drevik crew's displays lit up with warnings. The human warship had seen them. And now, it was responding. For a heartbeat, the Drevik scout ship held its breath. No one moved. No one blinked. A stillness swept through the bridge like the hush before a storm. On every console, alarms screamed silently in red, flashing alerts in a language built for logic, now struggling to measure fear. The human warship had not answered with words. It had answered with precision. Targeting overlays danced across the Drevik systems, each one painted in sickening clarity, not one lock, not 5, 32. Every angle, every escape route, the Indomitable, if that was even its true name, was watching them with eyes that saw everything. The Drevik had studied human military structure before. They expected hot-headed captains and erratic orders, species driven by emotion. But this was not chaos. This was design. "Commander," came the voice of the Drevik sensor technician, dry and brittle, as though even speaking was dangerous now. I do not believe we can outrun them. They're predicting our movement vectors before we make them." Commander Threx's throat clicked, an old Drevik sign of anxiety. He forced his voice to remain even. "Cease all active scans. Shut down drive signatures. Bleed power from external systems. Make us small." "But they've already seen us," whispered another. "We're not prey. We're trespassers." That word settled over the bridge like ash. Out the main viewport, the warship remained still, towering, silent. Its hull gleamed like burnished obsidian, layered in armor plating that didn't reflect starlight so much as drink it. Across its surface, small flares of energy rolled and twitched, like muscle spasms beneath skin. No Drevik ship had ever encountered anything like it. There was no clear bridge section, no visible hangar bays, no sign of weakness or intent, just a monstrous, immovable fortress in the dark. And then the voice came. No flare of engines, no warning shot, just a voice, ruthless in its stillness, sharp as a razor. "Unidentified vessel. You are observing a Terran war asset without authorization. State your purpose." It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The sound was flat and toneless, as if spoken by a machine that had long since forgotten mercy. But there was something worse hidden in it, a presence. It wasn't just aware of them, it had judged them. Commander Threx hesitated too long. The Drevek operated under cloaking tech that bent photons, masked thermal signatures, and falsified warp wakes. They had evaded the greatest security systems of the Outer Empires, slipping through wars and invasions like whispers. No species had ever caught them like this. The voice returned, colder now. You have 5 seconds to comply. The lights dimmed across the Drevik ship as the crew followed Threx's desperate commands. Scans shut down, power levels dropped, external beacons silenced. They were trying to look harmless, small, insignificant. But it was too late. The Indomitable systems didn't flinch. Its targeting overlays remained locked, its weapons now visibly humming along their rails. The hull shifted, revealing tiny openings, nozzles, ports, hatches, and for the first time, the Drevek saw what it truly was. Not a ship, not a station, a weapon with no off switch. We need to respond, Threx said, his mandibles trembling as he turned to his comms officer. Open a channel. Keep your hands away from weapons control. The channel opened with a quiet tone. This is Commander Threx of the Drevik Exploratory Wing, he said, his voice brittle. We apologize for the intrusion. Our presence here was for scientific observation only. We meant no harm. A long pause. The human voice returned. Observation. The word was spat like an insult. Then, quieter, more dangerous. You thought we wouldn't notice. Threx flinched. The human wasn't asking. The human knew. Terran space is not open territory. You have crossed borders, cloaked and silent. This is not a misunderstanding. This is provocation. No, Threx said quickly. We were only gathering data. The Terran civilization is of immense interest to our interest. The voice echoed again, this time laced with something new. Not anger, not rage, contempt. Let me show you what we do to those who find us interesting. And just like that, the Indomitable powered up. It didn't fire. It didn't have to. Its engines glowed with a slow, seething burn, energy cascading from a power core that pulsed like a captured star. Weapons platforms extended along its frame, unfolding with mechanical grace. Its defense systems activated in layers, blooming like the petals of a carnivorous plant. All across the Drevik ship, crew members froze. This wasn't a show of power. It was a message. The humans could erase them, easily, and they were choosing not to, which meant they were waiting for something. Threx's voice faltered as he whispered to himself, why build this? What kind of enemy needs a ship like that? It was a question without an answer, until his helmsman turned, face pale. Sir, you should see this. Threx moved to the console. His eyes scanned the readouts. The Indomitable wasn't just aimed at them. It was sending out silent pulses, echoes through subspace, scouting frequencies, long-range signal checks. Threx recognized the pattern. It wasn't targeting them anymore. It was watching the dark. Commander, came another voice from the bridge. If they weren't building this ship for us, then what were they building it for? Threx swallowed hard. The Drevek had believed humans were messy, disorganized, primitive with toys. But what they had found here wasn't primitive. It wasn't messy. It was focused. Humanity had become something else, something patient, something prepared. And that was what terrified Threx the most, because species that wait to fire are not afraid of battle. They're expecting something worse. The Indomitable sent one last transmission. This time, just a sentence. Next time, bring a message, not a scanner. And then it cut communication. Just like that, the warship turned, slow, deliberate, engines flaring. It didn't jump to hyperspace. It didn't retreat. It vanished, slipping into deep space silence like a shadow returning to the night. On board the Drevek ship, no one spoke. For a long time, there was only breathing, shallow, quiet, haunted. Then slowly, Commander Threx turned toward his comms officer. "Send a transmission to the Ministry," he said. His voice was dry but steadier now. "High encryption. Mark it as Tier 1 threat level." "Message?" the officer asked. Threx stared at the empty void where the Indomitable had been. "Tell them," he hesitated. "Tell them we fired first." The transmission was sent. Commander Threx leaned back in his command chair, mandibles clenched, his mind churning faster than the ship's computers could process. Around him, the bridge had gone quiet again, though the silence was not peaceful. It was brittle. Everyone aboard the Drevek scout ship knew what they had just seen, and none of them knew what to make of it. In the center of the ship's sensor display, the void remained undisturbed. No trace of the Terran vessel, no radiation trails, no hyperfold signature. The Indomitable had disappeared without a whisper, leaving behind only a hollow in space and a deeper one in their understanding. Threx stared at the sensor logs replaying in loops, as if watching it again might make it less horrifying. He zoomed in on the visual data captured during the first scan. The initial structure of the ship, the external design, the weapons emplacements. It was more than just a warship. It was more than a mobile fortress. It was intent made real. The hull wasn't built to look sleek or majestic like the Drevek vessels. It was brutal, blunt. Its plating was layered with no concern for aesthetics, only function. Every line of the ship was designed to survive an assault, not just a normal battle, but something far worse, something prolonged. He turned to his engineer. "Run structural estimates. Compare it to known capital ships." The engineer hesitated. "You're not going to like the answer, Commander." "Tell me anyway." She tapped a few commands into her console. If this ship were to go head-to-head with a standard Drevek cruiser, it would take less than 20 seconds to destroy us. Our plasma shells can't penetrate its outer armor. Even direct impact would do nothing. Threx nodded slowly, absorbing the calculation. "And if we used a full salvo?" "Best case," she said quietly, "it notices." He turned back to the projection. Something still nagged at him. The shape of the hull, the curvature of the weapon systems, the strange composition of the armor. There was a purpose here beyond military efficiency. It was too symmetrical, too prepared. "Does this ship match any human design patterns we've cataloged?" he asked. "No," said his second officer. "Nothing even close. This ship isn't a design evolution. It's a leap. like they skipped a dozen generations of development, maybe more. Another pause. Then the officer added, "But there is something else. I've been analyzing the materials from the sensor scans. Commander, it's not just metal. It's something else." "Define something else." "Organic traces in the outer coating, responsive alloys, layered memory polymers. This ship, it learns." Threx froze. His internal temperature dropped a degree. "You're saying it's alive?" "Not in the way we think," the officer said quickly. "But it adapts, changes. It's like the ship is a soldier by itself, not just a tool, but a combatant." Outside the viewport, the stars continued to drift peacefully by, but the Drevik crew no longer saw stars as serene. Now they looked like cracks in a shell, thin places where something older and darker might be pressing in from the other side. Back on the Indomitable, hundreds of light years away, Captain Elias Grant reviewed the same footage, but through different eyes. He sat alone in the warship's main briefing chamber. The lights dimmed to match the low tone of thought that filled the air. His officers had returned to their stations. His crew had resumed their silent patrol through human territory. But Grant could not stop thinking about the scan. The Drevik hadn't just stumbled across them. They had come hunting, and now they knew. The Terran Command had warned about this possibility. For decades, Earth's growing military fleet had operated under the pretense of regional defense. But the truth had always been darker. Grant exhaled slowly and turned toward the central projection table. With a flick of his fingers, he brought up the Indomitable's blueprint. Not the official one, but the classified design, known only to captains like him. 3 full combat decks, sub-hull weapon silos, multiple redundant reactors, bioadaptive shielding lattices grown in labs that the public would never know existed. The Indomitable wasn't just humanity's strongest warship. It was their last line of hope. He leaned forward, zooming in on the section labeled Deck 12, Cryo Hangar. That was where the exo units were stored, modified soldiers, augmented beyond the bounds of natural biology. He'd never seen them deployed, not yet. But he had read the files. He knew what they were capable of. And more importantly, he knew why they existed. Because deep in the archives of Earth's hidden history, beneath the satellites and colonies and public records, there were whispers of something worse. The Erebus. It was no longer a theory. It was no longer a secret passed through encrypted channels between admirals. It had a name now, a shape. And humanity was still not ready. A soft chime pulled him from his thoughts. "Captain," came the voice of his first officer over the internal comms. "Command has acknowledged our report. They want your assessment on the Drevik incident." Grant rubbed his temples. "They weren't just observing," he said. "They were measuring us, testing our reactions, but now they know we saw them." He paused. "And now they'll start asking why we built this." Silence on the other end. Then, do we answer them? Not yet. He stood and turned toward the bridge. Not until we're sure they're ready to hear what's waiting in the dark. Far across the stars, aboard the Drevik command carrier Heliara's wake, the decrypted report from Commander Threx arrived in full. Admiral Selrin stood in the center of the command spire, surrounded by walls of data feeds, holograms, and rotating intercepts, all now overwritten by the detailed logs of a single encounter. 32 targeting locks, subsurface energy mapping, interceptor swarm behavior patterns. Worst of all, the final line of the Terran warship's transmission. Next time, bring a message. The Admiral's crest of silver fins quivered, a subconscious twitch of alarm she hadn't felt in decades. She was old enough to remember the Cavor anomaly, when a Drevik probe had been torn to atoms by an unknown energy field on the fringe of their charts. That incident had taken years to decode. This had taken minutes. She read the report again. Next time, bring a message. The humans had let them go. That wasn't mercy. That wasn't diplomacy. That was a warning. And the more she studied the scans, the clearer it became. This Terran vessel wasn't designed to deter alien fleets. It was meant to survive the apocalypse. Selrin turned slowly to her intelligence officer, Voro, who stood stiff as a post, his fingers still dancing across the light pads. I want everything on Terran warship production in the last 40 years. Military budgets, manufacturing hubs, unusual troop movements, shipyard expansions. If it flies and it's from Earth, I want it on my desk. Voro nodded without speaking. His face was pale. And the Union? She asked. They still believe the Terrans are loud but manageable. They've requested a statement, but nothing formal. As far as they're concerned, this was a misunderstanding. Selrin's throat clicked, the sound sharp and impatient. They're fools. Another feed blinked to life near her. High Counselor Riss of the Outer Border Colonies appeared, shimmering in the blue projection field. Her expression was tight, jaw rigid, voice taut with a forced calm. You've seen the Indomitable, then? Riss asked without preamble. I've seen enough to wish I hadn't, Selrin replied. This isn't posturing. This is preparation. For war? Selrin shook her head. Number. It's worse than that. She gestured, and the holograms split into fragments of footage. The precision of the weapons locks, the shifting hull plating, the silent yet instant reaction to the Drevik scan. They've designed a ship that expects to be outnumbered, outgunned, surrounded, and still win. Riss leaned in, studying the same footage. That's not defense. That's survival engineering. Selrin narrowed her eyes. Exactly. The question is, survival against what? For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Riss lowered her voice. Do you think they've encountered something out there? Selrin answered without hesitation. Yes. The line fell into silence. She didn't say it aloud, but they were all thinking it now. The Terrans are afraid. And if a species like them, chaotic, aggressive, impossible to contain, had stopped expanding and started digging in, then what they feared had to be beyond comprehension. Selrin turned away from the call, stepping toward the central holotable as more data streams filtered in. Satellite intel, orbital scans, discrete intercepts from Terran shipping lanes. There was a clear pattern emerging. They were building faster than logistics models could explain. They were stockpiling weapons far beyond what was required for border defense. And most disturbingly, they weren't using any of it. There were no Terran invasions, no new colonies, no campaigns of conquest, just thousands of warships, waiting, watching, dormant, like predators in tall grass. She turned back to Voro. What do we know about their deep space activity? Sparse, he admitted. but we have confirmed long-range Terran probes crossing the far fringe sectors. Uncharted space. Areas we assumed were barren. Assumed, Selrin muttered. What did they find out there? Voro didn't answer. Instead, he hesitated, then brought up a new file from the secured archives. Commander Threx included this in his final package. It's fragmented, likely data the Terrans didn't realize was leaking during the encounter. He tapped the console. A hologram appeared in the center of the chamber. Wreckage. But not Terran, not Drevik, not anything recognizable. The pieces were enormous. Fractured hulls the size of cities. Twisted debris fields drifting across the void like forgotten bones. The ship designs were angular and biomechanical, stitched together with grotesque shapes and strange curling spines. Some parts pulsed with faint energy, dim, almost lifeless, but still active. The scan had picked up faint signatures from beneath the debris, not enough to form a picture, but enough to feel a chill. Where was this taken? Selrin asked. A sector the Terrans label as unmapped, no official star charts. Selrin clenched her jaw. Then they've been hiding this longer than we thought. The Drevek admiral stepped back from the image, dread creeping along the edges of her composure. The council wouldn't believe this, not easily. To them, the Terrans were a manageable threat. Wild, yes, but predictable, containable. But this wasn't wild. This was silent preparation. She keyed a private frequency and sent a direct encrypted order. Recall all scouts from Terran borders. Effective, immediately. Full blackout. Do not provoke. Then she opened a second comm channel, this one for classified channels only. Summon the Shadow Assembly, she said to the system AI. Tell them, the humans are watching the dark, and I think the dark is watching back. The Shadow Assembly had not met in over a century. When they did, it was never officially recorded. Their existence was denied even within Drevik High Command. No minutes, no logs, no statements. Only whispers of their influence, their quiet fingers reaching into the darkest corners of space and dragging back what no one else dared to see. Now they sat, 12 figures cloaked in silence, each occupying a separate chamber across light years of distance, their forms reduced to silhouettes on encrypted holographic links. Even in shadow, tension rippled among them. Admiral Selrin stood at the center of her chamber, eyes narrowed, posture stiff. The images she had shown them still floated above the projection platform. The Indomitable's weapon systems, the fractured ruins from beyond the Terran border, the pulsing signals from something not dead among the wreckage. She had expected disbelief. Instead, there was only quiet fear. One of the silhouettes leaned forward, the voice heavily filtered. You believe the humans found something in the outer void, and that this ship, the Indomitable, was designed not for conquest, but containment? Yes, Selrin replied without hesitation. And I believe they've seen what it looks like when containment fails. Another figure spoke, older and raspier. The Union will never believe it. They'll demand more evidence. The Union is slow, Selrin snapped. We can't afford slow. A beat of silence. A third figure finally spoke. The one known as Architect Halex, the oldest member of the assembly. His voice was calm, but it carried weight like iron in deep water. Tell us what you fear, Admiral. Speak plainly. Selrin stared at the floating holograms. Her jaw tensed. "I fear," she said, "that the Terrans are not preparing to fight us, or each other, or even the unknown." She turned back to the shadows. "I fear they are preparing to fight the end of things." The silence that followed was complete. At last, Halleck spoke again. "Then we must find what they saw." 3 systems over, hidden beneath the battered crust of a rogue moon drifting in the halo of a collapsed star, a Drevik reconnaissance unit powered up a long-forgotten relay, one that hadn't been used in generations. It connected them to Sector W-17. No chart marked it. No race had claimed it. Even the navigation systems had to be overridden manually, as if the void itself did not want visitors. The relay had been silent for decades, but now it responded. A single message. "Signal confirmed. Object remains active. Movement recorded." Back aboard the Indomitable, Captain Elias Grant stood inside the inner observation vault. This was not part of the bridge or even the official command deck. It was a sealed room, reinforced with the same layered composites that made up the ship's core, designed to survive in case the rest of the vessel was lost. Here, the lights were dim, the temperature kept low. No sound from the engines, no blinking consoles, only a massive floating window of plasma glass that displayed the ship's most carefully guarded secret, the Erebus recording. He stood alone as it played. It was not a video, not in the conventional sense. The footage was reconstructed from dozens of sensor feeds, black box logs, scout drone recordings, and partial psychic echoes from the last surviving crew of the Ascendant Dawn, a Terran vessel that had ventured too deep. Grant had seen the recording once before. He never wanted to see it again. It began with silence, then static, then movement. Out of a starless backdrop, something appeared. It wasn't a ship, not in any way humans or Drevek or any known species understood. It had no engines, no wings, no hull. It was shaped like a wound. Not a thing, but an absence of things, a distortion of the space around it. Lights bent as it passed. Time seemed to stutter. The space between the frames of the recording grew. Then came the screaming. Grant clenched his jaw, fingers tightening behind his back. He forced himself not to look away. Crew members of the Ascendant Dawn appeared on the feed, not by camera, but by a deeper signal. Their minds, torn open in the final moments of contact, had burned their terror into the ship's psychic recorders. Grant heard their thoughts like echoes through a canyon. "It's inside the walls. No, the walls are gone. It's singing, burning. There are faces. Why are there faces?" Then, silence. And then, a flash. The feed ended. The Ascendant Dawn never returned. Only fragments of its hull were found months later, scattered across 4 parsecs, warped and twisted like metal left in a star's heart. The Erebus did not pursue. Not then. They were patient, waiting. And that's what haunted Grant most of all. Not the violence, not the destruction, but the waiting. Why hadn't they attacked Earth? Why hadn't they come for the Terran colonies? They were capable, that much was certain. So why wait? A soft tone broke his thoughts. A voice on the ship-wide channel. "Captain, we've received a private transmission. Drevek High Command. It's marked High Priority Diplomatic, eyes only." Grant turned from the window, his face carved in stone. Patch it through. Moments later, in the sealed strategy room adjacent to the bridge, the transmission played. It was Admiral Selrin. Her face was composed, but the edges of her eyes betrayed the weight of what she now knew. "You were right," she said. Grant didn't reply. He waited. Selrin continued. "We found something in your border region. Debris, movement. Our systems picked up a signal, a living signal. It responded to a Drevek scan." Grant felt a chill run through his chest. "It was watching us," she finished. He leaned forward, voice low. "And now you believe?" Selrin's reply was soft. "Belief is a luxury. We need to act." Grant exhaled slowly. "Then you'd better act fast." "Why?" He stared at the console, then up at the stars through the viewport. "Because if the Erebus knows you saw it, they won't keep waiting." Admiral Selrin stood in the central chamber of the Drevek Strategic Complex, the highest military command post in the outer systems. Before her floated a projection of the Erebus contact, the twisted fragments of the enemy, and the chilling scan logs from the Drevik outpost that had dared to ping the void. The Erebus had answered, but they had not moved. Not yet. Selrin tapped the central console, sending her compiled report to every Drevik fleet leader, planetary governor, and science minister. The encryption keys burned through layers of clearance protocols. She didn't care who protested. She had seen enough. The humans were right. They weren't fortifying for domination. They weren't posturing or bluffing or preparing for war against the known. They were bracing for extinction. The Erebus weren't coming for territory. They weren't interested in diplomacy or borders or conquest. They had no demands. They existed for one purpose: erasure. And now they were awake. In high orbit over Drevik Prime, Terran warships began to arrive, first in pairs, then in squadrons, then in massive triangular formations. The Indomitable was among them, holding position at the center like a silent sentinel. Its shadow stretched across the planet's surface, a reminder of what was at stake. Aboard the vessel, Captain Elias Grant stood shoulder to shoulder with Admiral Selrin and a coalition of alien military leaders, gathered for the first true Unified Defense Council meeting in history. Rothans, Zoritel, Telari, humans, Drevek, all of them here, all of them watching. Projected above them, the Erebus loomed, not in person, but in simulation, a tactical recreation of their known behaviors, reconstructed from the doomed ascendant dawn, the debris scans and psychic echoes retrieved at enormous risk. Adaptable, resistant to energy and kinetic damage, capable of breaching dimensional structures. No known communication protocols, no response to surrender signals, Grant explained. They devour technology, assimilate biology. What they don't understand, they erase. The room was silent. Selrin stepped forward. "We believe they are part machine, part organism, but also something older. Their ships don't just fly. They live. They grow. And they remember." Another projection activated, this time showing ancient galactic history. Fragments of lost civilizations vanished before records began. Cities turned to dust. Entire planets darkened in an instant. "We used to think these were myths," she said. "Old warnings. Ancient ghost stories." She turned to the room. They weren't stories. They were the first warning. Zorth, the Rothan commander, stepped up beside her. His voice was low, quiet, For the first time in his life, the humans saw it first, and they didn't run. They didn't cry out. They didn't warn us, because they knew we wouldn't believe them. He looked around at the others. And they were right! The lights dimmed. Then a third image began to play. Live sensor feeds from the edge of known space. Movement.
Dozens of signals, then hundreds. The Erebus had begun to stir, no longer hiding in the void, no longer waiting. They were coming, 3 days later. The sky burned. They came not as an invasion fleet, but as a wave, folding space, corrupting it, bleeding into reality like ink in water. Erebus vessels burst from the darkness like nightmares given mass, their shapes twisted and impossible to define, as though the universe itself was trying to reject them. The first line of defense, a coalition fleet positioned at relay node Theta 9, opened fire. They lasted 7 minutes. Terran railguns tore holes in Erebus armor, only for the gaps to close within seconds, the material re-knitting like muscle. Drevek EMP charges detonated in synchronized bursts, only to find the Erebus absorbing the energy, adapting, redirecting it. One Zoratel cruiser managed to ram an enemy vessel at full speed. It vanished on impact. The Erebus kept coming, but this time, so did the Galaxy. The second line, anchored by the Indomitable and 4 allied dreadnoughts, held firm. Plasma lances cut swaths through the void. Fusion bombs ignited at close range, staggering some of the Erebus carriers. Boarding parties of Terran exotroopers launched into the fray, armed with weapons built from reverse-engineered Erebus tech, salvaged in secret over decades. And for the first time, they slowed. Captain Grant stood on the Indomitable's bridge, shouting orders, his voice hoarse, his uniform singed. All around him, the crew moved like clockwork, focused, calm, trained for this moment their entire lives. "Target the rear appendages! Cut propulsion! Keep them in the blast radius!" Grant barked. The Indomitable fired a full barrage. Railguns hissed, missiles screamed, and a beam of superheated plasma lanced across space, slicing through the belly of the nearest Erebus warform. It writhed, it bled, and it died. Aboard the bridge, someone gasped. "They're not invincible!" Grant clenched his fists. Number just hard to kill. More Erebus ships emerged, warping space in every direction. But they no longer moved without fear. They hesitated, shifted their formation. They had noticed. They had underestimated humanity. And now they saw. The galaxy was not filled with prey. Not anymore. The battle lasted for 13 hours. When it ended, half the coalition fleet had been lost, but so had Erebus vessels. The Indomitable, scarred and scorched, remained in orbit, its engines low but alive. Captain Grant stood on its deck watching the stars. Admiral Selrin appeared beside him. "Reports from the outer sectors?" he asked. "They're regrouping," she said. "But they're slowing. They're learning we won't die easy." Grant nodded. "Good." He turned toward the stars. "Because we're just getting started." A long silence stretched between them. Then Selrin whispered, "They fired first." Grant looked at her. "No," he said. "They always fire first. We're just the first to answer back."